Hey, it's Brendan here, and there are still quite a lot of you subscribed to this podcast, which I don't update very often, and I really appreciate that. Hopefully you're listening and not just downloading the shows, but I see the downloads kind of happen a little bit here and there. I wanted to make you aware of a really special 3-part interview series that's happening on my other show, If I Knew You Better, which is sort of the more global version of this show that's not specifically really China-focused. On If I Knew You Better, I'm normally interviewing people in the world of entertainment, writers, directors, authors, producers, actors, talking about how they became who they are, what they've learned along the way, what they can share in terms of tips, tricks, and also the insights and the special deep reflections that they have from their often pretty amazing journeys. I've had some really cool guests on there, a lot of great character studies. There's a lot to enjoy and listen to and learn from there. But I also use that podcast to have sometimes more personal reflections of my own. I use some solo episodes sometimes, and I have the Fretful Loweye Radio Hour segment that I started here with Kevin Geiger. We still do that about every month or so, depending on our schedules. But I have been experimenting with a few other ideas, and one other aspect of that show that I've developed starting last week was I'm doing a 3-part episode that is a deep dive on someone, and I'm going to do a little bit more of this as I do some follow-up episodes with past guests. On If I Knew You Better, I'm also going to bring back a few of the Global Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom guests for round 2. I have several outreach feelers right now to some people who I think you would enjoy hearing more from. I know that I would anyway. But this week is part 2 of a very special 3-part series with Ellen Shook. It's a story about redemption, growing up in small-town southern U.S., a journey through the end of the 50s into the dawning of the 60s and the 70s, and on into the present day. It's a look back of a life that's pretty amazing to have lived. And Ellen Shook is also my mom. And yes, I'm interviewing my mom. She's not famous yet, but when you listen to her story and listen to her great humor, her really salty sense of humor sometimes, and her perspective, you will understand what a warrior she is and how she's persevered through so many challenges, and she's overcome her own small-town sheltered ignorance of the greater world and continued to just claw and scratch and sometimes stumble her way forward, but she made it. And it's an amazing story to me. I know it as well as almost anyone, I guess. And I really wanted to commemorate this. And so we sat down, we did a 3.5-hour interview over 2 days back a little before Thanksgiving when I was back in the U.S. and I visited her for a week. But I've cut this down into 3 themed episodes. Act 1 or part 1 is about the early days growing up, getting into the late 60s, and that's when she met my father. This week's episode is all about that relationship, and it was pretty dark. And if you're triggered by domestic violence, abuse, things like that, it's going to be a bit of a struggle at times to listen to, but I've done my best to be true to the story and have as much candor and honesty as possible, but not be gratuitous. So I actually pulled back when I was editing on some of the stuff that's just a little more visceral, but there's plenty there. When you hear it, you might think that what did you cut, if for God's sakes, when you listen to this. But I'm really proud of this series. I'm extremely proud of my mom for her courage in allowing me to bring you this story. And I really hope you'll check it out. I'm putting links in the show notes to the playlist for If I Knew You Better, so you can find these episodes and all the others. You can go back through the archives of that. I have some really cool guests on there. Next week is Act 3, Part 3, My Mom's Story, which is redemption. And if we hadn't had that Act 3, it would have been basically impossible to do these first 2 parts for many reasons, as you'll see. But I hope you give it a listen. I'm really proud of this. This is easily the most personal and profound personal interview that I've done. And I've had some that I've been proud of, especially proud of, but this is right at the top of the list. And I'll be back in February with more entertainment success stories of how people came from nowhere and went somewhere that I think we can all enjoy and listen to and relate to. But for now, please go check out If I Knew You Better. I'm Brendan Davis. Thanks a lot. Check that link in the show notes, or you can search If I Knew You Better in all the podcatchers. Thanks.